Y'all ready?
Live back at you guys with another episode. We have the usuals here: Isaac, Daniel, Noah, Alex, Eli, and we have a very special guest, Christina Nicola of MLB.com, covering the Marlins. Christina, how are you? And we're very excited to have you on the show.
Pretty good. It's Wednesday. We're in November. It's almost the holiday season, as we can tell by someone's attire. But no, doing good. How about you guys?
We are doing great, and let's get right into it. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. A lot of coaching changes, mainly the biggest one, Marcus Thames, I think that's how you say it. He has been named the hitting coach for the Miami Marlins. Alfredo Perrique is now the third base coach and infield coach. Then you have Eric Duncan staying on the staff as a quality assurance coach. And finally, Edward Gonzalez, assistant hitting coach. So I guess a lot of Yankee ties. We have Thames, Perrique, and then we have Gonzalez. Christina, what are your thoughts on all these coaching changes?
Well, as you mentioned, the Yankee ties. I tweeted a joke earlier about Miami's already known as like a sixth borough, so it just continues. Honestly, I don't. The hitting side, it's not surprising. Obviously, we saw, with Trey Hillman and Rodriguez parting ways. Also, the way that the team, produced, whether it be just guys not doing what they usually do in their career, injuries, turnover, a lot of that. But yeah, Pedrique makes sense. You hear good things about him so often. And then, I mean, it's interesting that I believe it's pronounced Tim's. His contract wasn't renewed with the Yankees, so why not bring him down here?
Yeah, Isaac, what are your thoughts on all these moves? I mean, as we mentioned, Yankee ties, and what can Marcus bring to the Marlins? I'm not even going to try to say his last name anymore.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to see a lot of turnover when it comes to the offensive side. This is an offensive starving team. We've seen the last couple of years, and I think Fish Trice made a great tweet saying, you have James Rosen, who is with that historical offensive team in Minnesota. Now you have Timms, who is with that big Yankees offensive juggernaut. They're just hoping that some of these, coaching changes really translates to better offensive numbers with the Marlins.
Yeah, you're underselling it. It's literally the two offenses in MLB history that had the most single season home runs, and the hitting coaches from both of those teams joining forces. So all you need now is the juice balls to come back, and you need good players, and then you're there.
Yeah, just bring back Stanton, bring back Ozuna, and we'll be straight.
Hey, I was with Will Manso. He's like, if we're bringing back Yankees, let's just bring back Stanton too. What are we doing here? If we want to go full out, we got to bring Stanton back.
Maybe Christina can pay for him.
Yeah, definitely don't make that kind of money. As someone who was around when Stanton was covering the team when Stanton was around, great dude. Like, he was always professional with me. But, there's a reason why with a big contract like that, a small market like this, and also doesn't stay healthy, that's not a risk you can take. He did have what's interesting, and I didn't realize it until looking at his stats maybe like a month ago, is, he was healthy almost the whole season, and he still didn't really put up numbers that Stanton should be putting up.
Yeah, Daniel, I mean, we haven't heard from you here. What are your thoughts on the news? And I love the Christmas drip, by the way.
Yeah, I had to wear it. And, the new coaches, like, I think, how the Marlins have been the last couple of years, in like the bottom third of almost every hitting category, runs category. I think change is good, especially when you have, a coach coaching that's that important. I think when you bring in new turnover, it's good. And I think it could end up doing good because the Yankees have been one of the best hitting teams recently, and I think you could bring someone like that, like Thames and Timms. I think it'll do good for the Marlins. I expect maybe they're not going to shoot up to maybe one or two, but hopefully they can get into around the middle pack in terms of hitting with the new hitting coach.
Yeah, when this guy came on, when the Yankees didn't extend him or renew his contract, this was a guy who I thought would be a good option for the Marlins, but never thought anything of it, as I didn't know what was the chances of him even coming. But I mean, he's on the Marlins now, and this is for sure going to be great. Now you have Rouse and you have this guy, Thames, and I think it'll work well for the Marlins. Hopefully, now they get the offensive power for them to get things going, man. I think on the coaching side, they've done a good job. Nothing to Eric Duncan, but he just didn't have a good season when it came to having these guys hit last year. It just didn't work out. So This question is mainly for you, Christina. Jonathan India is named Rookie of the Year. Only one person voted for Trevor Rogers, and that was not you. It was some other reporter from the Cincinnati side. So, what made you vote for Jonathan India over Trevor Rogers, and your thoughts on how the voting came out?
Right. So this was a decision, and I didn't make spur of the moment. I spent quite a bit of time going back and forth with it. I saw Trevor make all of his starts. I didn't have that benefit with India. But there was a couple of things that I think stood out from the broadcast that I think kind of, whether it was the way I voted or how the other voters voted. And one of them is obviously there's the recency bias, which, there's no, secret to how, Trevor's second half went. Unfortunately he had to step away for a month. He also had that back spasm that kept him out of start. But even before then, before the All-Star game, if you look back, he went, I believe it was June 15th, was his last time going into the pitching 6 innings, having a quality start. His last 11 starts, he was a 3.86 ERA. But not just that, you can't set aside how important it is to go 150 games out of 162 that Jonathan India did. And, his first 2 months weren't strong, but that was during the lovely spider tack pitching era. Historically, guys, and especially offenses, the weather's cold, offenses start cold. And he just kept getting better and better. So he definitely distanced himself there. And I think, I mentioned this earlier in a different podcast. One of the things, too, you look at stats, but you also look at narratives. And obviously, Trevor was always going to be difficult for a pitcher this year because you had a 2020 uncharacteristic season where he was going to be on an innings limit. He didn't end up reaching it because he was away. But, whether it was not being as efficient as his, season went on, it wasn't even a matter of him, like they were monitoring. Like he just, was throwing too many pitches early in starts and stuff. But within India, he wasn't even in big league camp for the Reds, like to start it. He had never played at all in the big league. So that's something that's very interesting as well. If you look at his splits, you think, oh, Great American Ballpark, blah, blah, blah. He actually had better road numbers. Obviously I think the NL Central, lends itself obviously to hitting this. So I took into account various things. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. And, I've had the benefit of getting to talk with Trevor's family before. Trevor's a great guy, but that's not something that's going to make me affect voting for him when, like I said, I spoke to him last week for a different story and he brought it up himself saying that, hey, if, I wouldn't be surprised, being away a month if that plays a factor into the race. And as he told me, and as everyone should think, family is more important than baseball. And he made the right decision. But he even knew, probably the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go, I guess, down the road on your thoughts on, I guess, how the voting came out. Isaac, your thoughts on this. I think this was in a way expected, although Trevor did have a lot more, how can we say this, he did have the All-Star appearance. He had the 2 Rookies of the Month. That time that he missed, I guess, in a way, pretty much just hurt him, and he never came back to see him in that second half. Your thoughts on Trevor Rogers coming in second, and I think we'll just move on after because I think in a way we'll all have the same answer.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it pretty brief. I'm with Christina in the fact that he just failed to go deep into games when he did come back, and even when he was pitching really well, maybe after April, he just wasn't going 7-8 innings every time the way other guys in the rotation were, like Sandy. So I think that went against him as well. But knowing that, looking at how many innings he pitched 133 innings. That's more than I would have thought to the naked eye. He did pitch more than I thought, and with sort of significant less amount of playing time than India, he actually had a higher wins above replacement than India. So that was one thing that went in his favor, and also just that he had a higher ERA plus compared to India's OPS plus, which I don't know if you can really correlate the two, but that's just something to consider. But overall, they definitely the writers got the vote right. I would like to see Rogers maybe get 2 or 3 more first place votes and maybe a few more second place, but overall, it went correct, I think.
And just wrap it up.
I want to that's I think the interesting thing is maybe the people that didn't put him second because it was clearly him or India.
Right.
I was having trouble with my third place vote, and then I kind of went not unconventional, but I thought Tyler Stevenson, and I guess the way the Reds have already gone with this offseason kind of made my choice interesting. Was they already traded away Tucker Barnhart because they have so much faith in Stevenson, as a defensive and offensive catcher.
Yep, and
it was Brian De La Cruz on your ballot, Christina.
Hey, he'll be eligible next year, right?
No, I thought so
No.
too.
I don't
He
think
already went too many. Not enough.
that really bothered me.
Well, see, this is the interesting thing, right?
All the bench
Is
stuff.
for the and that's why you have to take a step back too with Rookie of the Year, especially because it's not saying like that Trevor's or like India's gonna have maybe a better big league career. Trevor could, Dylan Carlson could. Like a perfect example is the AL, right? Randy Rosarena wins. Great player.
After 6 years in the big leagues.
Right, great player, has a great season, but Wander Franco is going to be the superstar in baseball. It's just one of those instances of quantity, volume wasn't as much, and you have to take that into account.
And just for an example, Lewin won't be eligible, I'm pretty sure, for Rookie of the Year next year. I think the only Marlin is Edward Cabrera. He's going to be up there, I'm pretty sure. You also have Sixto, who I think is going to be up there for sure, which made a playoff.
JJ when he comes up here and rakes.
JJ, Max Meyer, all of those guys are going to be eligible for Rookie of the Year. And I think we can move on to, I guess, the news that came in last week with the Marlins offering Starlin Marte a contract. I know me and Isaac spoke about this on Unfiltered, which drops tomorrow. So I'm going to start off with Christina. Your thoughts on the Marte news, and is this really a chance for the Marlins? Although we have the Phillies in the running, Rangers have been spoken of, the Astros. It's a dozen teams I think we've heard already.
So when I saw it, first of all, it was interesting because when the trade happened, I was the one that asked over Zoom to Kim, would you guys be interested in, will you reach out to him after the offseason? And she goes, of course not. We wouldn't be doing our due diligence. I think I'm probably in the minority, along with Joe Fazaro, my mentor, that I think it would almost be like not a step backwards, but he was part of the club this year that didn't get it done. And I think what's interesting, he's a great player, no doubt, but he sacrificed his power, which is what this game is about now, and just does like the contact and steals. And he's going to be 33. That's not, he's already shown that he can get hurt. Fluky ways, of course, but like that, if he wants those 4 years, big money thing, I don't think it's worth the risk. But it'll be interesting to see. Maybe the Marlins decide, with the way the landscape is for certain outfielders, via trade or free agency, that it pays, to bring him back. But if it becomes a bidding war with teams like the Phillies and the Yankees that are probably closer to legitimately contending than the Marlins, it's not worth it, especially when you have guys in the pipeline like Lede, Meisner, Burdick, so on.
Yeah, and Alex, I think that's the issue with the Marlins. They don't want to spend money. We've been seeing this. So how much of a chance do the Marlins have?
Wait, let me interject. There's a difference between spending money but spending wisely too. Because also keep in mind, like there's 12 guys that are arbitration eligible. There's guys you're going to have to extend. You have to find out who is part of that contention window. How do you want to allocate that money? There's a lot of moving pieces. It's not just like signing Marte, doing this and that. Like you have to take it all into consideration.
Yeah. So I guess the way we could put it is the Marlins usually get outbidded, and I think they will in all these bidding wars, Alex. So, looking at secondary options, and we could talk about the Marte situation, but the Marlins couldn't get it done last time. Do you think they get it done this time? What kind of a contract would get Marte back on the Marlins?
Yeah, I know. We said it at the deadline when we talked, Kevin, on this exact show, that you can't get into a bidding war with other teams for any player. And Marte, I think, is a very underrated player. I think he's one of the better players in baseball, even though his power is probably not what he used to be. He also used to play in the NL Central, so you have to remember that. You come to the NL East, it's a different story. So take that into account as well. But that's a guy that you could stick anywhere in the lineup. He's a leader. Great guy to have in any organization and a young organization. So it would be great, yes, to have him back. I don't think the Marlins will get it done, because of exactly what Christina said. And I say this all the time, and we hear it all the time, and you know that they're not going to block prospects. So if you give Marte a 4-year contract, does he block a prospect like JJ Lede or Peyton Burdick or even Conine if they do decide to keep him here in the Rule 5, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I don't see it happening, to answer your question. I think the big name or the center fielder that they want, I don't think it'll be one of those big games. Castellanos, possibly. He's more of a corner outfielder, though, I think. So that's the only one that I would see possible out of these big name free agents that want multiple year deals. But to answer your question, no, I don't see Marte coming back because of the bidding war situation and the amount of years that he wants.
Yep. Noah, your thoughts on
So I would love to see Marte back. I don't think it will happen because we just don't have the ability to outbid anybody else. I think a good choice would be Byron Buxton if we can work that out. A good trade for him, maybe Cedric Mullins even. I think Nick Castellanos would be interesting. I don't think it would really work out in in our home ballpark. He's already said how he hates the big ballparks. I think that was him. Um, I do want to see more of JJ Bleday, guys like him, Peyton Burdick. I don't. I think we only need like one guy for the outfield, and we'll be fine. We have guys coming up the pipeline that will be good major league hitters. I saw that, Isaac. Um, but guys like JJ Bleday, De La Cruz, Sanchez, it's not like we're gonna have random guys standing out there that aren't gonna be able to play. They can hit.
Yep. Isaac,
Well,
I
I'll
mean, yeah.
jump in really quick. I think if you're going to put any sort of weight on Blade or De La Cruz producing at a level that you need to be producing for your team to be contending, which is what Miami needs to be doing next year, which is what Jeter's been outspoken about, is that this is the year. You cannot, take a risk and just give Blade 300 plate appearances. You cannot give De La
I
Cruz
agree.
400 plate appearances. So in my opinion, they actually drive Sanchez. You know what? I think he proved enough. You can tentatively pencil him in right field, even though the defense just scares the shit out of me, catching balls barehanded because he overruns balls. But I think you need to make a trade for a center fielder, and I think you need to acquire a corner outfielder that's offensive oriented, because this team is starving for offense more so than the 2013 team.
And we definitely need a catcher.
What do you think about someone like Andrew McCutchen? Because he's actually been pretty consistent over the last couple of years, even though he's getting older. But he's actually been, I think probably the best of his career since his MVP type years. Is that someone you think we can bring in? Someone maybe the Marlins can even afford? Maybe someone like Andrew McCutchen, rather than getting someone who may be too expensive like Castellanos, or trading for Brian Reynolds?
See, but that's the fear, is what you said. He's getting older, playing in a big ballpark like Lone Depot Park. That just lends. He's had injuries. Like those are things I guess you have to take into account. Yeah, and when I was saying before, like obviously not necessarily blocking prospects. It's inevitable if the Marlins want to get players in trades. They're going to have to give players. So like Meisner, Burdick, Blade, I don't think it's reasonable to think all three of them are going to stay around. Do you sell high on Burdick now? Because Meisner could honestly, he's probably the best all around of the three of them. I think injuries in college kind of lowered his stock a bit, but yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see. When I didn't get to be at GM meetings last week, but I had some questions that I gave to my colleague to ask him, and one of the things she did bring up, and kind of tying it to like the pieces that are in play, young guys for the Marlins. I asked, did Lewin Diaz show enough to like be considered a strong candidate for first base? And the things that stood out from her answer were, he showed the power for home runs, which is obviously something this team desperately needs. And they arguably saw quite a bit more of it in the second half when you had Sanchez, Lewin, obviously Jazz, what he was doing. But like you were seeing actual home runs. It's kind of like hit or miss sometimes. But that obviously is stellar defense. But she said whether he's a first base or not, there's just so many pieces to the puzzle, and you have to see how they fit. So like if you're trading, she mentioned multiple bats. So you would assume maybe he's a multiple bat catcher and then an outfielder, and then you kind of roll with what you have here. I think we'll have a better idea depending on who stays with the 40-man roster, who gets tendered a contract, because you have guys then like Jesus Aguilar, Garrett Cooper. How do they fit into the mix? So it's going to be interesting these next couple of weeks before the CBA to look at maybe a better picture of that.
Yeah, but regarding those three guys at first base with Lewin, Aguilar, and Cooper, I've been on the record just saying, roll into spring training with all three. One of them's not going to perform. One of them's going to get injured, especially, with Cooper and Aguilar, both of them coming off surgeries. But it might make more sense to trade the one that you don't see as a future. So I guess Cooper would be the odd man out there. But that's a good point, because you are going to make other trades for other positions that maybe just make other positions fall into place in a way.
And I do believe Cooper would be. I mean, not Cooper. Aguilar is going to be that guy at DH. Yeah. But how much more? I don't know how old Aguilar is off the top of my head right now, but I don't know how much Aguilar has left in the tank. And now you look at Baseball America's 2025 thing, their starting lineup. Not that Cooper is going to be that guy in 2025, but I mean, maybe it makes more sense to have Cooper over Aguilar at some point, or just have all three of them come into spring training, and depends who goes the best. Although I do believe Aguilar should be in over Cooper at the moment.
I saw that was it Baseball America? Is that who
Yeah.
had it?
Yeah.
That was completely baffling because no offense to Garrett Cooper, he can hit when he's healthy, but that's the problem with him, right? He can't stay healthy. You can't rely on him to be healthy, and that's a big question mark. Like he would be one of those, like I mentioned, maybe he gets non-tendered or they try to treat him as part of a package for someone because it is enticing. He's got the bat when he can stay on the field.
Yeah, no, I really
So
think his
bring up-
bat is underrated a lot. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up one more name on the outfield front to get just to close on that topic. The name that I personally would like to see them go after in free agency is Michael Conforto. That guy is still 28. He came off of not a good first half. Second half was a lot better. I know he's probably still not in the best graces with Marlins fans for what he did this past season.
I was
But
just going to
other
bring
than
that up.
that-
I was literally just going to bring that up.
Yeah, but other than that, I think if he signed here, that's a win. I mean, maybe Eli, you can tell us
He
what you
owes
think
us.
a contract would look like for him. But after a slow first half, I know second half was better, but that guy rakes at Lone Depot Park, 274, 390, 468 in his career. He can hit at big ballparks. He can play all three outfield spots.
He's familiar with the division.
Exactly. And that's the guy that I would honestly target over Marte, who I think is unrealistic, Castellanos. That's where I'm spending my money. If I have one pick and I'm in the GM seat, that's the guy I'm targeting, and I'm on the phone with his agent constantly.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the fact that he could at least fake it in center field, that's a factor I like, and that's what I don't like about somebody like Castellanos or even McCutcheon at this stage of their career. Like, they're strictly in the corners, and even in the corners, they're a liability over there. And the fact that Conforto, by default in the Mets, he's had to play some of that, that's a little factor that I like. I think there was some overreaction to the slow start he had to this year. If you look at almost more than half of how he finished the year, it was pretty close to his career norms. And for that reason, he's going to get a pretty sizable deal, I would think, if he wants to. If he wants to max out on the length, I think he could easily get 3 years or maybe even push it a little farther just because he's relatively young for the free agent class. I don't know exactly what he's trying to do because he's a Boris Klein and they go in a lot of different directions. Some of them max out the money. Some of them really want to focus on the individual salaries each year, and he might take a short pillow contract and then go back out there coming off a more typical year. So he's an interesting guy for sure.
And another interesting guy is,
I think it goes back to what Christina said. You trade one of the big prospects. You trade Peyton Burdick, who's a name that's going to get brought up, or Meisner, who I hope not, but that's a name that's going to get brought up, and I'm sure already has been. He, like I said, you can move him around. He can play all three spots. DH comes, that opens more capability. So, yeah, definitely the guy that I would be targeting. Not talked about a lot on Twitter or anything like that, but that's who I would definitely look at.
Yeah, I agree
another
with you
guy I
there.
think you could look at as well as Avisail Garcia. I know that this one has been brought up, especially by Barry Jackson. They said there was interest there. It makes sense. 30 years old. He had a pretty good season with the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know. I don't think he can play center field if I'm correct. I think he could just play the corner spots. I don't know how many games he played in center field at the moment, but it makes a lot of sense. And if you look at the mid-tier free agent outfielders, he's one of the top ones out there. And I don't know what a contract could look like. Maybe 2 years, 10 mil. I think that's a little bit too little for him. Maybe a little more. You would go in the price range, but I don't know what you guys may think about that one.
I think Garcia would, coming off the year he had, you're probably inflated by that ballpark he plays in. I think he'd be commanding 3 years, 30-something million, unfortunately.
Okay.
So like we talked about yesterday on Unfiltered, I think if you're going to look at him, he should be of the second tier. I'd say behind Conforto, behind Buxton, behind Castellanos. He'd be, I guess, the first guy of that second tier where you look at. But I personally wouldn't go. I don't think he's been a very consistent offensive player. I think he has immense raw power, but I think going after him to be your main outfield acquisition would be a little risky.
Yeah, and I guess going into trade targets for the Marlins, I guess a new one came up today. A little more. Now we've spoke about it, but we could talk about it a lot more because our good buddy Craig Mish mentioned that it wasn't. I think it was more of his opinion more than the actual report. But the only potential trade target out there that can single-handedly make the Marlins a threat in 2022 is this one. I can't go further into it. I'm optimistic they'll be on the phone with the Twins this winter. And I think we could only think of Byron Buxton. Isaac, I know you're a big advocate of this guy, so I'll let you start it off, and then you guys could hop in. Your thoughts on maybe getting Byron Buxton, and what would the price really look like for a guy like him?
It's a tough one, this one, because just like obviously not as good, just like Garrett Cooper, when healthy, this guy's a top 10 player in the league. He is just as dynamic as any player in Major League Baseball. I think Aram made some great points regarding that. What stickles between them and signing an extension with Minnesota is just they didn't want to go incentive heavy, which I think Miami could do if they wanted to extend the guy. But regarding a trade package for this player, and I don't think we've ever seen a situation like this where you rent a 1-year player who's so phenomenal when healthy, but just hasn't been able to keep it together in his career so far. So I think it would start with a guy like Max Meyer, and then maybe not so much more after that. But it'd be a fascinating trade nonetheless. And I would actually try and acquire Mitch Garver at the same time from Minnesota, because I think he would solve, the two most glaring holes in this team, which is center field and catcher.
And Mitch Garver is on a very cheap deal. I'm pretty sure he's like on a 1-year, $6 million deal. So it makes a lot of sense. Christina, what would be your thoughts on this Byron Buxton? Hopefully, maybe coming to Miami.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm looking at his right now. He has had one full season, 140 games, and it wasn't even a good one. That's not a risk I would take, especially if they ask for Max Meyer, I'd hang up immediately. I'm sorry. You need, yes, like we said, he's a 5-tool player if he's healthy. But the problem is, what the Marlins need is the guaranteed guy who's going to be out on the field. You can't if you're going to put your prospects that you've been purposely building toward and holding on to, or now that you've got, the naming rights deal, you got a new TV deal. If you're going to spend it on a guy who's a question mark. That's why you go with Castellanos, or with a trade for a catcher, which that's the avenue that it's going to have to happen for the Marlins, because the free agent catching class, just catching in general in MLB is very weak. But that's not a gamble that makes any sense in my opinion at all.
Okay. Alex, if you want to go into it.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Christina said. If they're asking for frontline prospects like Max Meyer, I wouldn't even prefer giving up a guy like Meisner for him, even though the Marlins have the outfield depth right now, at least the minors. So yeah, if they're asking for frontline prospects for a guy that just can't stay on the field, he's a free agent in 2023. So then you got to either talk about extending or just letting him walk after one season, and who knows if he stays healthy, right? And you're talking about mortgaging some of these frontline prospects that we just talked about. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't. If the asking price was a little less, I could see it. But again, yeah, just a guy that hasn't proven enough to garner what the Twins would probably ask for. It's a rebuilding team. They're going to ask for prospects. So, yeah, no, I agree. I wouldn't do it for what they will ask for. I would not do it.
And maybe he's going to be 28. He's going to be 28 next month, so he's already older than Correa and some of the those big name shortstop guys. Just to put in perspective,
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you guys. If they ask for Meyer, even 1-for-1, I wouldn't do it. Even though I just think that's the name that they'd be interested in, especially if you add Garver to that deal. But if you can get away with just 2 top 10 prospects in the Marlins system for this guy, even in just half a season this year, he had a 4.5 wins above replacement. Half a season. It'd be a calculated risk on Miami's part. So I don't know if they'd be willing to do it. I don't know if it'd be the smart thing to do. If he goes out and has 600 plate appearances, then it'd be a risk well done. But it's a huge, huge if. So that's why I said it's a very tough one with Buxton.
Look at what they need in the center fielder. They need a guy that will be the cornerstone. He's going to be he needs to be counted on to be on the field every single game, with 1 day off a week, and that's what they're targeting. They can't take a gamble, as Christina said, on a guy that's not going to be on the field for half a season like that.
I guess
you can't do it.
What the gamble is. It depends. It depends what you're giving up.
Yeah, and then the contract is another thing. There's no control. You have him for 1 year, and you have to make a determination whether you're signing or you're letting him walk. And that's a big gamble to make if you're talking about giving up frontline prospects. So I agree.
Right. So if they're going to do that trade, it would have to come with a caveat, even with Lindor and the Mets, you're already in negotiating the extension, because otherwise you're definitely not making that deal.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to go. That it would be extremely risky, especially with the contract, because I'm pretty sure Minnesota offered him $60 million. He didn't take it. I think it was
$80 million.
$80 million. He didn't take it, and I don't think Miami's even going to top that. I mean. So it just doesn't make sense. And if you keep looking at Minnesota, we talked about Mitch Garver, and we'd also talk about Max Kepler. That's a very good option. I think he's on a 5-year, $35 million deal. He's in the 4th or 3rd year of that deal. So I don't know what you guys may think of an option like Max Kepler, who is a lot more – it's a safer option than a guy like Byron Buxton, who his future is very uncertain.
That would make more – something like that would make more sense, honestly, in my opinion.
Yeah, with Kepler, it's more like a kind of like the Christian Yelich team-friendly deal before he, went crazy with Milwaukee. But it would be a left-handed hitting option which I think for that, you might as well keep the prospect capital and go after Conforto. That's just me. I think Conforto, like Christina said, he knows the division. He knows the park. He knows he can hit it out of, any park in this division. And he can hit every pitcher in this division. So I think that would be the option when you're looking at those two specifically.
Yeah, and I think we're going to move on to pitching and news that I think came out last week. It was from John Morosi. He talked about Pablo Lopez and Eliezer and the contact between Toronto. And they talked about Alexander Kirk. Christina, your thoughts on that news and why would Alexander Kirk be such a good option for the Marlins catcher? Alejandro.
I'd be remiss if I didn't make a Lady Gaga reference. Alejandro already he gets a check mark. He gets in my book. So it's interesting. Like I alluded to before, the catcher. So one of the things I had my colleague asked Kim last week is this the 2022 starting catcher on the roster, and the response, of course, was we're looking at different ways to get better, which basically said, we all know that the catcher isn't on the roster at the moment, especially if you want to be a legitimate contender. Now, what I find interesting is with the universal DH, assuming it comes around in 2022, I hope you all hope as well.
Assuming we play in 2022.
Right. So if that happens, can you maybe sacrifice hitting from the catcher standpoint, since there's no longer a pitcher and the catcher is technically almost like the pitcher of the lineup, for a guy who is defensive first, or maybe lends itself? Because, if the Marlins are a very pitching first, very deep in the system, organization, is that maybe more important to have a guy who can handle the staff? Like, it's no secret Sandy Leon, obviously he couldn't hit, but he knew how to handle a staff. Trevor Rogers owes a lot of his success to him. The different pitchers do, and they were always very quick to be like Sandy's like the dude, So Alejandro Kirk, obviously the hit first guy. He's hit everywhere. From what I've heard, he's improved. Like, he's lost weight, because I know that's a big thing that people say about his stature, but he's also improved defensively too, and a guy who wants to improve. So it would make sense to me, but like I said, like, there would be different options of guys, and it's also whether the Marlins, is it a defensive first or hitting first? Yeah, there we go. There it is.
So just jumping in on that, if we were to start focusing on the catcher as like the pitcher's spot, then why wouldn't the team have held on to Sandy Leon? If he can control the staff, if he can handle the staff like he did last year, why not hang on to him if we're not really caring about how much he hits? Well,
he was a minor league deal, remember, last year, and he didn't. He's not a guy that you're signing to a multi-year deal. You can always, if they want to, both sides come together and do something similar this year. But you've got Nick Fortes now in the system. Peyton Henry, you got Alex Jackson. So you got three guys right there. Jorge Alfaro, who probably be either traded or non-tender, I would assume. Great guy, but just whether with injuries, just all the different things that have happened, not producing enough, obviously would be the odd man out. But yeah, and that's just a philosophical thing. I'm just wondering, like, how the league will adjust. If there is the universal DHs, would that be because not everyone's a Buster Posey. Not everyone can do, but
or Real Muto,
right? Who also, he's had some injury histories, and I don't know. I think if you'd ask how does he handle a pitching staff, I haven't necessarily heard glowing reviews about Real Muto on that front. But it's interesting. Like, there's not. Can you name 7 like amazing catchers in baseball just off the top of your head? It's a very weak position. Like, there arguably might be some better prospects than actual current major league catchers. It's very interesting.
I think you make a phenomenal point actually with like the DH. Will teams really just like prioritize the receiving and the defense? Because you are adding that extra offensive player. You don't have to worry about Sandy Alcantara coming to the plate. And if that were the case, Christina, how would you feel about a Jacob Stallings trade?
I was just going to mention him.
Right. Well, that exactly. So that would be a perfect example. And it's also interesting too. Like, there's so much uncertainty with the CBA. Like, will the new one address like the automatic strike zone? Because then something like what Jacob Stallings does, then it's not technically worth as much, right? Because it'll be called as it, in my opinion, should. If it's in the strike zone, it's a strike. But we don't know. And that's why, I mean, I don't envy Kim Ng and the other GMs and whatnot making decisions, because you don't know at this point, and we don't know
We're
if,
heading
let's
towards
say,
a lockout. Like, how are we supposed to know which guys are gonna, or how much to pay guys if we don't know if we're gonna be able to do any of this coming up?
right, or if there's going to be a DH, or if there's a floor. Like, there's so many different, things that we don't know. And it is interesting, though, that there already have been some signings. Eduardo
Yeah.
Rodriguez signs.
Barrios.
Barrios does his extension. Yeah.
Verlander signed today.
Yeah, Verlander.
Syndergaard gets-
Noah Syndergaard gets
Syndergaard
that
to
was
the
massive.
Angels.
Syndergaard,
yeah.
of course.
With
My
catching,
father would
though,
so
I'll just bring it
upset
up.
about that one.
As Christina said, it's dying art. Like, good catchers that play two ways is becoming a thing of the past. I think Realmuto may be one of the last that we ever see in the way the game is. But if like you said, Isaac, if you're going to prioritize defense, Alejandro Kirk can't be the option. I'm sorry. I know what Christina said about, he may have lost weight. I'm sorry. It's not just the weight. You can look at the stats. Out of 59 qualified catchers, he was 43rd in framing per StatCast. So no thanks, especially not with a young pitching staff. And then you look at his arm, and he doesn't have much of an arm. He allowed 26 stolen bases and caught 6 runners. So doesn't frame, doesn't throw guys out, and there's questions about the body. So I hate that option. I really have doubts that he will stick as a catcher. I think he will be either a first baseman or a DH, personally. So that's where I am on him. I didn't like that name at all. I liked the other guy that was brought up that, of course, the Blue Jays will probably ask the moon for in Moreno, because that's a prospect that is very close and did well in the Arizona Fall League. So, yeah, I mean, that's who I'm targeting as a near major league ready prospect like Moreno. But, of course, the asking price is more, so you have to take that into account. But you got to get it right. Just like center field, you have to get the right guy, a cornerstone guy that you can count on. And I think Moreno is much more that guy, even though he hasn't made his debut yet, than Alejandro Kirk. That's
Right, and that's the issue too, though, is when you even think to this year alone. So why is, let's say, Alejandro Kirk available? Because they already have their big league catchers, and they have the one coming up. And so Kirk, while he is good, and he has potential, but like there's the guy that's better. And then the same thing happened with That's why I had heard from our Brewers guy when the trade happened with John Curtis, is that like Peyton Henry, like he's a good dude, but like they have an even better catching prospect coming up. And like that's the same thing with the Braves. Alex Jackson was once a top 100 dude. And William Contreras is even now their name. They're kind of saying, oh, he might be dealt because they got Darno and they have Shea Langoliers, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not necessarily indictment of those specific players but like that's something to monitor, right? When a guy's name is floated, because there's another guy coming up that's even better. So it's like, we're not going to keep then.
Yeah, it's like Barnhart with Stevenson, like you said. There's that next guy in line, right? And I understand that. I'm just saying, if
you're fortunate
if you're talking
enough
about Kirk as the player that you're looking at, I think you could look elsewhere. And if you're talking about Blue Jays, that's the guy I would be having discussions about is Moreno, not Kirk. But anyway.
Yeah, and if you look at the Dodgers too, they also had 2 guys in Will Smith and Keibert Ruiz, and they got rid of Keibert. So I always thought, like 3-4 years ago, I thought Keibert was a better prospect. I was looking for Keibert in those trades, but who would have thought that Will Smith would become the star that he did?
And you also look at catchers. There's also Wilson Contreras, who, although he's on the 1-year deal, his price may not be too high as it may have been maybe a year ago or maybe 2 years ago when his contract was 2 to 3 years long. So I don't know what you may think about that kind of an option, Christina.
I think that one goes back to minus the injury front, but like the Buxton one, like you'd want an extension if you're gonna get a guy like that,
Well, I agree with you, but he's just someone that would improve this offense and the defense, frankly, behind the plate so quickly that let's say you do it. One, the trade, the return wouldn't have to be so grand if it's a rental. And yeah, you are going to be in the same position you are next year with needing a catcher, but he will have played here 1 full year. Maybe he wants to just extend right away, or maybe there'll be better catchers on the free agent market next year. I'm ignorant to the fact to whether there's better catching options available next year. But I think if it's like one position where, okay, we need a stopgap for right now, trading for Wilson Contreras may not be the worst option.
But the problem is, and it goes back to the catchers, though, there's so few of them that the price, it's a premium position. The price tag is always going to be high. So getting him as a stopgap, he's not a stopgap. He's a guy that you would,
Right. No, he's too good to be.
You're going to have to pay, if you're going to pay for a guy, and especially, the Marlins have to be very much, I was saying this earlier with Joe, they have to almost have the Rays blueprint but with a little more financial flexibility. The Rays, well, now they have wandering guys, they're superstars, but like if someone goes down, there's got to be that guy that can replace them or do this and that. Like Joey Wendell, right? Like he's not a superstar, but every team would love to have a Joey Wendell,
Right.
So if you only have a Wilson Contreras for 1 year, that's not doing you any good. Just 1 year, because is 2022 the year the Marlins are going to go to the playoffs, even in the playoffs, and win the World Series? Probably not.
No.
2023 is when you could, in my opinion, realistically think, because the 2020 set them back a whole year. All the the organizations that had like the big farm systems and stuff, and it's like you lost a whole year of development. Good luck,
Yeah, but I think you mentioned 2023. This keeps getting pushed back, and at some point, you do have to take risks for the future and sort of put all your eggs in one basket, which is this year, which is 2022. That's just my thought process, because I don't think there's ever been more pressure for any single team to win more than this team needs to win in 2022. Yeah, that's just I know 2020 was a step back, quote unquote, but 2021 was supposed to be the year. So, and this is year 5 of his contract, of Derek Jeter's contract. They need to win.
See, I find that interesting. You're saying that, but like, if you're a Mets fan, you have two, like the Phillies.
But they're trying to do this. They're sending $330 million to Bryce Harper. They're trying.
Right, and not necessarily good long term. Like, because the Mets have maybe 2 starting pitchers right now. They don't have Stroman back. He's absolutely necessary for them. They're gonna need him back now that they don't have Thor, but they have Cookie Carrasco, who's
pretty good.
I think he's pretty much done, like injury wise, like, and he's how old now? And you don't know what DeGrom's going to look like coming back. Like they're in a big market. They're expected to win every year. There's no excuse, right? The Phillies, to an extent, the same way. And they haven't made the playoffs since 2011. Obviously, the Braves are the defending champs. Like those are the teams that like they need to be all in winning 2022. Like I think perspective is very. I get it. It is. You want to see the progress. 95 losses was a step back, but it's not like win now or else you guys, if you don't make the playoffs, this and that. Like, I think getting to 500, competing into like late August, September should be considered a very successful season this coming year.
Yeah, and I agree. Unfortunately, that is the reality, because here
I want to be in contention in September.
Right. That's the point. Like in reality, that would be great. I think that's not what they wanted going into when they bought the team in 2017. That this is the situation we're in. And so I hope that they have your mindset, Christina, because if they like start doing things that just hurt the future, then they're just, biting themselves in the ass. So yeah, we'll see.
How with the old ownership group.
Right. Exactly. Trading for 2 months of Fernando Rodney. That was just funny. But yeah.
Or trading Luis Castillo twice.
So like you said, I don't envy being in their positions whatsoever, because it's tough.
I think since the Marlins made the playoffs in 2020, they feel this kind of anxiety to make the playoffs again, and they really just want to start winning it. Obviously, I think we're all glad.
My high school baseball team would have made the postseason too.
And they need to show some kind of improvement at some point, because the first couple of weeks, or not weeks, the first couple of years, they didn't win. Now it's time to start showing what these guys in the minor leagues who are very close to coming up. I would assume it's Blade, guys like Max Meyer, to start coming up and making an impact, and you could start maybe making these big moves like the Castellanos one, hopefully to happen. Marte maybe coming back, or whoever it is. And I don't know if anyone else wants to hop in on that.
How far away are guys like Griffin Conine?
Far.
They're far. Yeah.
I don't think he planned on getting anything from him this coming year. Yeah. And I mean, that's something I think we're talking about offline is, with him, the fact that, how much he struggled down the stretch, and the fact that he's going to be eligible potentially for this Rule 5 draft if he's not protected, the possibility that even if he's left unprotected, he might not be selected.
There's a possibility that there won't be. I think I saw this. There's a possibility that there's no
major league phase
of
the
Rule 5 draft. So really, it wouldn't matter. Is that what I'm hearing?
I disagree in this. I think if Griffin Conine is unprotected, I think someone will pick him up. I think there's enough shitty teams out there like the Diamondbacks.
For sure, yeah.
I think he will get taken. I think they need to protect him and put him on the 40-man. But I don't know if that's a consensus that there's a good chance that he wouldn't get picked up, because this guy, he has 40 home run potential. I know he strikes out 1,000% of the time. I understand that, but I think there's enough shitty teams out there that aren't contending that would take the risk of putting him on the roster all next year.
No, what
So,
what
so
what
did
I'm at,
Patrick Wisdom, right? And he was a Rookie of the Year candidate.
what I'm asking is I didn't really read into it that much. Is there a possibility that Rule 5 draft could, like, there wouldn't be a major league part and we wouldn't have to worry about protecting guys this year?
I believe so. Honestly, with everything with the CBA, it literally affects everything, right? And I think there's, if it's not exactly that, it's some variation of it. Like it would be delayed, maybe. But yeah, I think so because it's winter meetings are the 5th through the 7th, and December 1st is the last day of
CBA.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. But yeah, the case for him is very interesting because
I hadn't heard. That's a great point. No, that's a good point.
I was going to ask you about this actually, Christina. The Rule 5 draft in particular, if it happens, like if the major league portion happens, which you just said, maybe it doesn't. Hopefully it does. We'll see. There's guys that are on that list that are Rule 5 eligible that I think could be gone. Honestly, you know, I don't think Conine. I think they eventually probably would protect him if it came down to it, but Bryson Brigman. There you go. Do you want to bring up that name again? Jeffrey Yan, who kind of had his coming out party here, you know, with Pensacola and did kind of crappy in Arizona, but I think he's a pretty volatile pitcher. So I think that could be another one that could go. Tommy Eveld, there's another one. So yeah. I just wanted to ask you, how much room do you think there is with 40-man guys? I know there is a little bit of room, right? But do you think that like those lesser down names like Eveld, Yan, guys that are, you know, not the tip top prospects like Griffin, I guess, top 15 prospect. Is there room for those guys to be added, or what do you think?
Right. So the 40-man is full right now. So and the decisions Friday is obviously so it's the two that I would agree with, like very interesting cases other than obviously Griffin, is Tommy Eveld and just lost my train of thought. Who was it? No, honestly, just with him, like you've got infielders, and he didn't finish the season strong from what I gathered, right? He got off to a really good start, and then he was pretty cool. Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of that we've seen come and go in the last couple of years. Jeffrey. Yeah. I mean, no one's pitching well in the AFL.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, you know, like they didn't send like the best pitching prospects. I think there's a new ball they're working with. There's also a lot of really good hitting prospects. The strike zone too, they've been doing the automatic, and it's a little bit different. But he's a name that's very interesting. I found out his story is pretty cool. But yeah, like it's one of those things. Like the Marlins had 2 Rule 5 guys they picked up this year, and it handcuffed them quite a bit. Zach Pop, obviously, I'm still, you know, pretty high on him. Just like he went the whole year after going 2 years without pitching.
I like that. Zach Pop was great this year.
Right. And he works as what he was doing, right? As a middle inning reliever.
8 innings.
Pitches. Right. And so Paul Campbell, like, is he going to be one of those guys to open up a 40-man spot then at the end of the week? Like, you know, he didn't get off to a good start. He had, you know, obviously the PED suspension, and then he had a couple stretches, but like how, you know, you can never have enough pitching, but at what cost, like for him to be taking up a 40-man spot? It's very interesting. Like if you want to make space for a Griffin or, you know.
Right. I mean, I may be stating the obvious, but wouldn't the obvious guy to, you know, make room would be Alfaro first, whether it's non-tendering or a guy like Isan Diaz? I think those 2 guys would be the obvious choices for whoever you want to add, whether it's Griffin, whether it's Bryson, whether it's Jeffrey. I think those 2 would be the first ones to go because you can never have enough pitching. Campbell showed some glimpses. Pop showed some nice stuff. I think Alfaro and Isan are the 2 that should be, you know.
Well, December 1st is the non-tender, like when you have to, that's the last day to tender a contract. So that's why it's interesting that the 40-man roster setting is this Friday, but then it's not until next Wednesday that.
So they would have to pay Alfaro.
Right. So that, or like if someone would trade for him, like, so that's why there's so many, you know, because that's part of, right, trying to boost his versatility is to show other teams when they put him in the outfield. That was one of the things, like, so, he could prove that he could do that, you know, and then of course he got hurt.
I know you don't want to spend too long on roster construction again, because we've done that on previous shows, Eli, and it normally like leads to people just mass exiting out of here. But yeah, it's an interesting list. I talk way too much on it, as these guys know. But anyways, it's an interesting list. Like Colton Hawk, who I know Isaac likes, is a good name to throw out. That did really well. I think he led the AA I think he led the Double-A South in saves, and maybe was even at the top of the leaderboard in Double-A as a whole, which is a good name that I think could contribute to the Marlins as early as next year. Dylan Weiss is another one that did pretty well that I think could go. So I think the Marlins will lose some guys, was my main point there. And another guy, just as a last, that I don't think will get claimed, but if he does, it would be interesting because you'd then be talking about if Alfaro goes, Sixto would be the last guy from the Real Muto trade is Will Stewart. So I don't think Will Stewart will get claimed, but just an interesting fact to bring up that the Marlins, if somebody wants to take a chance on putting Will Stewart on their 40-man roster, the Marlins could be left with one piece of that trade. So anyways, interesting topic.
Well, you can argue that it's a good problem to have, too, that you are finally showing that organizational depth that other places will want to snatch those guys up and that you don't have room for them, right? It's bad because you'd like to hold on to these people, but the fact, that's to look at it both ways, right?
I think we forgot to mention something that happened this week. Marlins made a trade.
Oh my God.
We got Lewis Head.
Head, dog. Sorry.
Isaac.
Sorry.
Isaac, we're trying to be mature here.
Yeah, the
Marlins made a trade for Lewis Head, who was a solid pitcher for the Rays. Although he was up and down the entire year.
Which might be more impressive, honestly.
Yeah.
Going back and forth 12 times, not having any stability like that. Yeah.
You got the Nick Natter treatment, Braxton Garrett. You got that kind of treatment.
Devin
Barrero treatment.
Yeah.
Lewis Brinson for a bit.
But this was a nice trade just to see, them adding a little bit more depth to a bullpen that's not in a terrible situation, but could always use more arms. And I think he had pretty solid numbers and some pretty nice stuff. But
I want to know who's going the other way in that trade, or is it just going to be cash?
We'll find out. It'll be some player. But whenever the Rays get rid of a pitcher or of any player, honestly, you have to just be worried.
And just to keep that going, last time
though, just keep in mind, because you said be worried. This was mainly a 40-man roster crunch for the Rays. That's why they made that trade.
Okay, and
he's a 31-year-old. He has a very interesting story. He almost gave up baseball, and it's not because they think he's not going to do well moving forward. It's just like the Rays are an amazing system, and they have to. And otherwise, they'll lose guys to the Rule 5 draft.
Similar to the Curtis situation, correct? Because when they got rid of Curtis, I feel like it was also a construction thing.
Right. So, sell high, and kind of like the Marlins did too. They somewhat, sold high, and they got a pretty decent catching prospect.
And the Rays are known to be getting pretty good player to be named later. Because I told this to Isaac yesterday on Unfiltered, and Chris Archer trade, the player to be named later was Tyler Glasnow. So look how that's turned out for the Rays. Coming back to the Pablo Lopez and Eliezer stuff, which I never got to the last question of that, was why would it make sense to trade Pablo Lopez? Danny gave us a pretty good answer yesterday, and I'm not going to say it because that's for tomorrow. But Christina, why would it make sense? Why would it make sense to trade Pablo Lopez?
Love Pablo as a human being. Love him when he's healthy, but that's right. That's part of the fear is, can he stay healthy? Can you rely on him? But then at the same point, are you technically selling him lower than he kept? It's that whole dynamic, and not just that, but if you trade him away, then that takes away from that pitching depth that you've been boasting about. But at the same time, though, you've got guys that are almost waiting in the wings. But then you're also, can you rely on Sixto Sanchez coming back healthy or Edward Cabrera staying healthy? Because they both have had injury histories. But as I mentioned, however long ago, just if you want to get something valuable, you have to give something valuable in return. And so I think it's no secret Eliezer Hernandez is like a 5-inning pitcher. He's a 2-pitch guy. Very great, what is a slider? But his slider, his fastball is low 90s, high 80s. So, if you're going to trade him away, there's only so much you can get. If you trade away a Pablo, it's a little more of a, sexy name to another team. So it's just, I guess, a matter of, and then if you package someone with them. So I believe Sandy and Trevor would be the, good luck, other teams that are going to be like, hey, what about these guys, But Pablo and Eliezer obviously make more sense that other teams would inquire about or that the Marlins would be a little bit more open about because of those injury histories.
I think Joe Fasari, makes great sense when it comes to you don't want to make a strength of yours a weakness by trading someone like Pablo. And a great point that I would make also is that now is not the time to trade Pablo. You said it. I would not trade him now because you would be selling a little bit low. I think a great time to trade him, I mentioned this on the podcast yesterday, is if the Marlins are in it, or they're having a great first half, and he has a solid first half, he makes all his starts, trade him at the deadline of 2022, where there's a team that's hungry to make the postseason. They need another starter. He's coming off a great 2020. He's coming off a great 2021, albeit with a little bit of injuries in last season. Trade him in the deadline of next year and get another major league offensive player, and that's where I would maybe consider, because you'll see what Sixto is, you'll see what Edward is, you'll see what
Max Meyer might be up by then.
Yeah, you just know more based on the minor league season and based on what these guys are doing in the big leagues, and you'll have a better knowledge of whether or not you can afford to trade Pablo. Because right now you have 3 guys who plan to be in your rotation, but you can't put so much faith in those guys if you want to be a pitching centric ball club. So I would definitely keep Pablo through the winter.
Yeah, you mentioned like a Pablo and Eliezer. I think some people are forgetting this Luzardo. Like, is that someone you see like staying in a rotation, maybe like 4 or 5 next year, or does he fall down, to the bullpen, or maybe as a long reliever, or maybe even a closer? Like, where does he fall in terms of maybe the Marlins' plan next year? Because that's really a name a lot of people aren't really talking about. That's kind of fallen off since the Marte trade.
No, definitely rotation. I think what's interesting is when I talked to Kim, was it for her feature for her 1-year anniversary thing? She mentioned that one of the things she not most proud of, but a trade that she actually liked that, obviously you guys probably do differently, was the Marte Luzardo trade, because she said specifically that getting Luzardo, I wish I had the wording on it, but it almost like it opened up a lot of different avenues for them. And so, like, it makes the rotation so much deeper. And, like, you saw that potential in his last start. Like, that's the Luzardo that the A's, had at one point. They thought they had what the Marlins can see from him. And with him having a whole, winter in the organization, being able to hopefully, communicate with Mel, and then the spring training, like, that'll be huge for him. Like, finally it's not easy for a guy, who's a former top prospect coming home, and then like, all right, just now you're going to meet a whole new team, and how they do things and this and that. Yeah. Like, he's working on stuff, and he admitted it, and he wasn't having a good year. He missed however much time because he, broke his hand or had a fracture playing video games. Like, he's definitely like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's one of those things too. Like, like even with Trevor, he came back and he was rusty. Like, he missed that certain amount of time. You're not gonna. You saw the old Trevor those last 2 starts, right? But for Luzardo, no, I think he's so interesting, and he's another lefty. True, right in that rotation. But yeah, that is the one we keep forgetting about. But no, he's got like 5 more years of control. Like, that's huge. It's, for a club like the Marlins, that's important. Like, especially when you're developing an organization, you can't necessarily afford guys, of a certain, caliber or monetary value. Being able
to bring it up as a last comment for me on Meyer, because Christina brought up the name potentially coming up next season. I definitely agree. Going to start in AAA, likely. We know that from everything that Kim has said. But man, if he starts out and he's doing what he did AA, all that guy needs, and I was talking to Chris from Pensacola on this on my show, all he needs is to bring the changeup back, because he had the pitch in college and he just never needed it because the slider fastball was so good. So if he gets around Sandy, gets around Mel, gets around Trevor, and brings that changeup back, hopefully starting in spring training. I really hope he's in spring training and actually pitching this time and not just there for the experience. I think he will be. But yeah, if he gets around those guys and shows that changeup that he can bring it back, there's no reason why, and they will not hold him down, and he will be here in the second half next season. So yeah, they're whether they move Pablo, Eliezer, Luzardo, whatever situation it is, there will be a spot for Max Meyer if he's ready.
Yep, and just to wrap it up here, Luzardo, I think he's gonna get all the chances possible because they traded Starlin Marte for him, and I don't think Alex Jackson will get as many chances. But Alex Jackson was traded for a Gold Glove winner, a World Series champion, Adam Duvall. So that's something else to keep in mind there. I think it'll just be a backup for the team, or I don't even know, just get released or something. But yeah, we'll see what happens when it comes.
No, if a guy, he's a catcher with 5 years of control left, you don't just release the guy. Like, you can't say that lightly, because like I said, it's a premium position and control. Like, you have time to try to develop him to whatever he can equate to, especially as a top, former top 100 guy.
Yeah, 2014 draft class.
He didn't show, much with the Marlins, but also keep in mind too, he's never had that was the first time he was getting to play every day. And he's very much like, take this with a grain of salt, like a Mike Zunino light, right? He's got crazy power, but he's also going to strike out a lot. So if he can just find a way that it's, at the moment, like we're all in agreement that he'd be like a backup, but like to find a way to make a little more contact, because you see the stuff. And also, like, I'm pretty sure he was catching quite a few Sandy Alcantara starts. So that tells you a lot of confidence they had in him, at least that way too, that they're letting the ace be caught by him,
Yeah, no, he did strike out. He just strike out almost 60% of the time, but you're right. It is a premium position. But also just saying like, if you just make a little more contact, that could be said for half of the guys that never really make it, like Monte Harris, that could be the case. But because he plays a position of need, and I'm with you, Christian, his power, by far the most on the team, I think. We're standing there. I'd say his power is just about with anyway. He's hitting the concourse. He's going to Giancarlo areas, regularly. So that's why, a lot of control left. I would keep him, but no backup or starting catcher job for a little bit at least.
Just to bring it up before we go, a lot as a hitter, like the Marlins' new hitting coach, Marcus Thames. A lot of strikeouts, a lot of power. Can he fix them? A lot of time to find out. So I agree. You don't just give up on a player. So yeah, new hitting coach in town, multiple new hitting coaches in town. Let's see what they can do with them. Maybe they can fix them. So definitely not a starter, I agree, but bat off the bench. If he can crank out 15 home runs a season, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and I think this is where we will wrap it up because we are at the 1 hour mark. Christina, thank you once again for coming. It was great having you. So once again from Isaac, Daniel, Noah, Alex, Eli, we will see you guys all in the next one next Tuesday, I think it is. I'm not sure.
Thursday, I think. No.
Thursday?
Thursday's Thanksgiving, though. Really? You guys are going to do
Eli.
No, it's Tuesday.
Every day. We'll do it the whole week.
It's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Every
on
day.
Tuesday.
See you guys on
Anyone
Tuesday.
else-
Next Tuesday, 7 p.m.
If anyone else wants to come out Wednesday, we're all going to the Panthers game.
Oh, Lord.
So
You don't want me there because I was at the game at Madison Square
yeah, you don't know.
Garden,
You're
which-
not allowed to go to the game. You're not.
You
allowed to
were?
go.
That's so dope.
No,
That-
yeah, no.
Well, no, it
we're
isn't
mad at
because
her. We're mad at her.
that started their losing streak.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
mad at
Which
her.
it was the curse of Christina, which I had warned ahead of time, like the Panthers people that I know. I'm like, I'm just letting you know ahead of time, like this is probably going to happen. And they almost came back. They almost made a crazy comeback. Like they made it 4-3? It was like 4-0.
Is the
4-1.
New York
It was 4-0, and then we made it 4-3.
Is the New York team good though? Does that?
The Rangers, I think, had two
Isaac.
tough losses, but they're good. I mean,
Okay. I just want to see like if it was like a really shitty team and Christina really like.
Nah, Igor Shesterkin is just amazing.
he was unbelievable. They were chanting his name like.
We've gotten into hockey chat. This is
I
a
know.
life
I'm
goal of
sorry.
mine.
I'm sorry.
Getting this stream into hockey
No,
chat.
No, this for Noah is like even better than talking Marlins, I would assume. But
No.
yeah,
Because the Panthers are good.
The Panthers are just too far away for a commute during the week for yours truly, unfortunately.
Facts. You and me both, Christina.
I know. We're gonna have to carpool.
Yeah, let's do it.
yes. So we will end it here. We'll see you guys all next Tuesday.
Thanks for
7
having me,
p.m.
guys.
Thank
Go
you so
fish.
much.
Peace out, guys.
Ballers.